Blessed morning to you, Aldi, and welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television International, where we take you down the stories that are breaking from our Nigerian newspaper today, being the 8th of February 2023. I'm Sarah Elisha, and of course, I have Rachel Tandy here with me. Good morning, Rachel. How are you doing?
I'm fine. How about you?
Fine, thank you. Thank you so much. We're live on Facebook and also on YouTube, so please do well to follow us on all our social media handles, and you can also drop your comment on Facebook and YouTube, and later on the show we'll give you the opportunity to call us and air your views on any story that's of interest to you. And let's quickly run through the papers. I will be starting with the Daily Times newspaper. Nigerian brand book partners need come, and we have NCDMB. You can read more of that story inside the paper. We have the big story, which is on new Naira. CBN will not be used to frustrate the 2023 election, says Emifele. We are seeking support of critical government institutions for seamless election coming from the INEC boss. TUC gives the federal government 7-day ultimatum over unavailability of currency and the fuel shortage. You can read more of that story. We have two picture stories on the front page of the paper. You can do that by grabbing the paper and reading any story that's of interest to you.
On this day newspaper, court discharges acquits Omokere firms of $1.6 billion fraud allegations, says formal procedure followed by the defendants in lifting sale of crude oil. And you can continue with that story on page 9. 48% of Nigerians now live below poverty line, says Humanitarian Affairs Minister. Coming from PDP, APC candidate siege to disrupt elections. The writer says, hold me, my family responsible if I fail to perform, Obi declares. Our priorities on page 9. The big story on this day newspaper, Naira scarcity, Buhari, Bagudu, Tamboa, Emefela, Bawa meet and seek solution. The writer says, President cancels meeting with NGF over Supreme Court action. CBN has no plan to thwart polls with Naira shortage, says the Apex Bank governor. Federal government blames opposition for politicizing policy. CBN has disbursed over 1 billion naira to banks in Edo in 3-day state government reviews. Ganduje alleges plot to disrupt democracy. TUC gives federal government 7-day ultimatum to address currency and fuel scarcity. And you can read all of that story on page 19. We have a picture story where we can see Buhari in audience with NGF chair, CBN governor, and EFCC. And that's all the news on this day newspaper.
On the leadership newspaper, political elite must adjust to reality of national unity coming from Osinbajo, the vice president of Nigeria. And coming from the PDP presidential candidate, which is Atiku, he said, I will fully exploit Bauchi Gombe oil. I think that story again after declaring strike. Iman makes U-turn, resumes operation. You can follow up more of that story. And we have in 2023, anti-Tinubu cabal wanted Jonathan as president. We're still having the issue of the internal crisis in the PDP. We hope that they resolve their internal crisis and actually face the election. And on the Turkey-Syria earthquake, girl 4 rescued as death toll hit 7,000. This is really a big number. We really send our condolences to those who have been affected. And we have federal government, BUA flag of 116 billion naira, Kanu Ganzure Gulum road construction. Navy arrests 2 traffickers and rescues 18 victims in Kanu State. The big story on cash crush, no end in sight as President Muhammadu Buhari, governors and CBN keep mum. Federal government fingers opposition party in Naira swap crisis. CBN won't be used to thwart the 2023 poll, says Emifele. Tinubu appeals for calm over fuel and Naira scarcity, and 1 killing Ogun riot. So you can follow more of that story on page 4. We have a picture story here where we can see the president and Boss Mustafa and many other stakeholders. So you can do well, grab the leadership and read more detail of that story.
On the Blueprint newspaper, we won't be used to scuttle elections, Emefiele tells Yakubu. The writer says INEC seeks cash for critical services. Buhari meet governors, CBN boss, and EFCC chair. And the big story, tussle over Naira redesign. Unscrupulous politicians out to sabotage Buhari government coming from the federal government. And the writer says a sure, decisive action to assuage Nigerian suffering. Protest spread nationwide. TUC gives 7-day ultimatum. Don't be dogmatic over policy, Tinubu cautions CBN. And you can read all of that on page 5 and page 6 of the Blueprint newspaper. Cordials 2x NNPC staff for 1.6 billion dollar money laundering. Nigerians must dialogue for peace coming from Sultan Bayero. LIRS partner on tax operation. Lagos targets 77.0 billion naira monthly IGR. Still on the Blueprint newspaper in Turkey, how my family and I escaped earthquake coming from a Nigerian survivor. We've impacted 50 million families through NSIP coming from Umar Farouk. Gunmen kill varsity lecturer in front of children in Anambra. What a sad one. You can read that story on page 8. And on shipping, Nigeria gateway to blue economy coming from the Korean envoy. Federal government vows to end fuel scarcity, warns supervised elements. Partners divert money meant for health management coming from NPHCDA, and we hope something is done about that. You can read that on page 7. Still a picture story showing the president with the CBN governor and the EFCC chair, and that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
The Nigerian Deposit Insurance Corporate, that is on the daily asset, where we have pledges, safeguard for the MFB customs investment. You can read more of that story inside the daily asset. And we have the big story on 2023 INEC CBN meet over free and fair elections. Nobody will use Apex Bank to frustrate electoral umpire coming from Emefiele. And we have Jega caution electorate against voting candidate with questionable character. Downside of the paper, still on Naira scarcity, Buhari meets the governors forum with Emefiele, and the federal government blames opposition for the prolonged crisis, which I think this is not the right way. Rather than looking inwardly, I do not know why this issue of blaming the opposition party didn't just start from today. I think this whole thing started when we started having the internal crisis coming from the APC, where we had Governor El-Rufai of Kaduna coming out to say there are some cabals in the APC, and that was why they wanted to buy the presidential ticket for the CBN governor and Jonathan during the consensus. But then since the former president rejected, and also looking at the fact that the CBN governor is a civil servant, and the rules that were said that if you are serving, you cannot run for all of that, even though there were some pictures of cars showing that possibly the CBN governor wanted to, but there was nothing of that sort. Right now, the concern right now is why blaming the opposition party, because this Naira redesign actually happened during the present administration, which is the APC. So I keep wondering, what is the bone of contention? Where really are they going to lie their argument from? Because the former president has nothing to do with this, and even if they are going to argue the fact that the present CBN governor was actually appointed during the opposition party, we will remember that he was re-elected or reappointed, by the present administration. That is to say that anything that is happening is based on what the present administration wants, and they are saying that he didn't give the president detail of everything that's supposed to happen. So I just feel all of this is kind of clumsy. It's really not clear, because we have to learn to own up with our full chest when something goes wrong during our time. Come out, apologize to Nigerians. This is where we have failed. We are working, trying to put all hands on deck to make sure that we address up to a point in time where we stop pointing accusing fingers, that this issue of this blame game we always love doing. Everybody wants to accept himself from it's not me, it's not me, it's not me. We need to learn to own up do the right thing. And I think this is where Nigerians will respect you. Say, okay, this person have taken responsibility. I remember when the Minister of Education said he has failed Nigeria. Yes, some people were sympathetic, some people were empathic about the whole thing. But where it's just one thing for you to accept the blame, but what are you planning to do about it? So with all of this on the paper saying that they are blaming the opposition party for the prolonged crisis, I hope they will come out and explain to us, apart from the fact that the Kaduna State governor have said there are some cabal. If they can only fish out those cabal so that they can concentrate on the election, I think that is what Nigerians want to hear. We're tired of hearing side talks kind of causing distraction to Nigeria. We need to focus, and I hope we listen that we are, I always say this and I'll keep saying it, that our leaders need to learn that they are servants. You are coming to serve. Any money you're feeding on is on taxpayers' money. So it's expected that you do what the taxpayer wants and not what you want to do. That at the end of the day should be for the better of everybody. I keep saying not for the better of some few individuals in the house. So I hope that will come together, the present administration, put their heads together. If they have some bad eggs, they should fish them out, deal with them the way they feel is possible, or the way they feel that it's more appropriate to them there, and stop bringing all of these issues and making Nigerians to become confused, even though Nigerians can be confused at a time like that.
Like talking about confusion, that was where I was trying, what I wanted coming in, because it's really a sad one. That in order, we're counting days to the general election, and every Nigerian is looking forward to it. What INEC needs right now is every support that they deserve to make sure that election, we are having fuel scarcity. As it is now, it is the threat. As it stands, the major threat to this election. Are we supposed to sit down and ask the NNPC or what they're doing about the fuel scarcity, what every other body, YIPMAN, are doing concerning making sure that there is supply and then there is fuel for this coming election? Not about the Naira redesign. We've made it clear that, you know what, in as much as the Naira design is needed and all of these policies are not wrong completely, we've agreed that the timing perhaps is not good enough, but it has come to stay. And the CBN governor made it clear that the president is in support behind him. The presidency said that they are in support of this policy, and the president himself have said he is behind. Now, you can't say that the president the governor of the CBN didn't give the president a full breakdown or an explanation of what is about to happen. The policy, the same way we understand the policy, I want to believe that the president is intelligent. Or are they questioning the intelligence of the president, which they have voted and they are still under him and in his administration? The same way I am able to understand what this policy is about, I believe the same way the president understood what the policy is about and what the Naira design is all about and what it is. So yes, if the president says he is in support and behind the CBN governor, is because he understood what the CBN governor is trying to do. But then what is the thing that threatens election now? So it's really sad that when you see men of power, that is El-Rufai and every other person in position to make sure that the tax that is ahead for Nigerians, which is the election, that it comes to happen without any problem, but rather you're just pointing fingers and then putting the blame on an administration that is not in power at the moment. And you've had 8 years to correct every wrong that they have done or every mistake that they have made. But for some reason, the Naira design, which was initiated by the present administration, you are blaming it on an administration that has been out for over 80 years. So it doesn't make sense. And I just hope that as Nigerians, we prioritize our issues and face the problem as it is. And the priority now is making sure that INEC holds this election by all means. That is, they get failed to run the affairs of this country on the 25th of February.
Of course, Rachel. Downside of the paper, we have Autumn directs immediate employment of Ben Sisa casual staff. You can read up that story on page 18. We have Naira swap court injunction, June 12 elements at it again, coming from Ganduji. And Supreme Court judgment on Lawan valid and sound coming from Ojudu, even though people are actually feeling that Mechani was not really giving the right verdict at the end of the day, looking at the fact that Lawan is the present Senate president and they feel another person should be given. But the court has already stated clearly here that whatever they gave, that their judgment was valid and sound. So if you want to know more about that story, you can check that story on page 12. We have IGP redeploy senior police officers. You can find that also inside the paper. And the last story I'll be taking on the paper says federal government to unveil new public spending policy on Friday. So keep your fingers crossed for that story on Friday, and also read more of that on page 15. And that's all on Daily Assets.
On the Nation newspaper, court frees Omokere, two firms in $1.6 billion oil fraud case. And you can find that story on page 29. NNPCL CEO, petrol scarcity will ease next week, and we are looking forward to that. We have a story that says Tinubu calls for calm over cash crunch and petrol scarcity. El-Rufai Abiodun, let's embrace peace. And you can continue with that story on page 5. We have another one saying Ganduje leaks Naira shortage, court injunction to anti-June 12th elements. The writer says limited cash withdrawal will scuttle election, says INEC. Federal government, why president can't end in peace. And if you want to know why he can't do that, you can continue with that story on page 28. And the big story on the Nation newspaper, Naira scarcity sparks protest, Benin CBN office bank branches shut. Protester block Benin Ore Road. Buhari meets Tambuwa, Bagudu, and Emefula, and we hope that we don't see more of these protests. We are at a very sensitive period, I would like to say, and I would like to beg on Nigerians that no matter how tight it is for everybody, but this protest is not going to help us out. What we want to see, we have to start thinking Nigeria and then plan like Nigerians. Do you want the 2023 election to take place on the 25th of February? Then yes, if you do, you don't need this kind of chaos. You need to be at peace no matter the hardship, because we know that INEC have clearly told us that insecurity is also a threat to the election. Even before fuel scarcity became a problem, insecurity was one of the threats to INEC when they talked about the election. So as in Nigeria, if you truly want to go out and vote on the 25th, I believe you should be one of those making sure that regardless of how hard and tight things are, that you don't find yourself bringing up any chaos or protest in the country. Let's just keep our fingers crossed and hope that we want to vote on the 25th of February. Still on the Nation newspaper, at the downside of the paper, we have Waba out, Aguero in. Death toll in Turkey, Syria, earthquake crosses 5,300. And you can read all of that on page 27. We have a picture stories of queues at banks, and that's all the news on the Nation newspaper.
On the Punch newspaper, the big story, Naira crisis may disrupt polls. INEC warns Emifere and the NSA, with the writer following that story saying some of our service providers have no bank account. Commission lament. Buhari governors meeting shelved. Minister said president's hands tied. Bank shut branches over customers attack. CBN calls for calm. And I'd like to read a little detail of that story. The Apex Bank has last year pegged weekly cash withdrawal limits set for individuals and corporate organizations to 500,000 and 5 million naira respectively. It also introduced a currency redesign policy which involved the issuance of new 1,000 naira, 500 naira and 200 naira notes last December. But explaining his concern to the CBN chief, Yakubu said the service providers needed to be paid fully or partially, adding that there were fears about the withdrawal limit. He said the Nigerian election is a huge and a complex one. It requires the engagement of critical services, and in line with the provision of the exchange laws and regulation, service providers are generally paid by the means of electronic transfer to their accounts. However, there are crucial areas such as transportation and human support services that have been immediately remunerated neither partially or in full because services are rendered. In addition, emergency situations may arise requiring immediate cash payment. Some of the critical service providers are unbanked. Over the years, we have worked with the Central Bank of Nigeria and commercial banks to pay for such services seamlessly during general election as well as off-cycle and by-elections. Over the years, the Commission has migrated all its accounts at national and state level to CBN, and this arrangement has worked without hindrance to our activities. In view of the recent policy involving the redesigning of some denomination of our currency and the limit on cash withdrawals and availability, we consider this meeting important in addressing some of our areas of concern. And also, we are confident that an aspect of this meeting will reduce anxiety expressed by some of our service providers. We are determined to make the 2023 general election one of the best elections in Nigeria, but we cannot do it alone. That is why the Commission is mobilizing every critical national institution for the best of the election. Now, we can see that now coming from the National Security Advisor, Baba Gana have assured Nigerians of a secure voting atmosphere, saying the security personnel were well prepared ahead of the poll. Speaking while hosting the INEC chairman on Tuesday, which was yesterday, the National Security Advisor noted, "We are severely meeting with the chairman of the INEC, the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, which I co-chair. We know what we have done. We are sure of what we have on ground. All of us here who are managers of the security in the electoral process know what we are doing. We are not in any way in doubt, but we need to let the entire country know that the agents of bad news are peddling all kinds of stories we see on social media. If these are intended to scare people, I want to dispel such illusions." I actually took my time to read all of that, Richard, because there are a lot of anxiety and fear, especially when it comes to security, which you stated, and also when it comes to the cash. And we can see CBN have given INEC the assurance that they will make the cash they need, and also whatever payment they need for service provider, it will be there. So we have no fear or any form. And even when it comes to security, that those who are actually peddling rumors left, right, and center, just so that they can make Nigerians feel very uneasy that nothing of that form is going to happen. So I took my test, and Nigerians will know that everything is on ground for the 25th of February. So all you need to do is make sure you have your PVC. Let's conduct ourselves in a civilized manner. Let's queue up on that day, pin our vote for that candidate you want, because causing chaos left, right, and center, breaking of ATMs, which we've seen on pictures, protests, burning left, right, and center, only give those bad people the illusion that yes, these people do not want the election. This is what they want, that the election will not hold at the end of the day. So if INEC has given us their word, I remember NMPCL have also said fuel will be available for logistics. We can see that the National Security Agency have said they will provide security. So what else do we need is just to be calm, pick up our PVC. That is the only thing you need, and go out there and vote. So I hope that will be wise and not let them win by making us scared at the end of the day. Still on the Punch newspaper, fuel price to skyrocket as marketers threaten shutdown. You can read that story on page 28. Banks ordered to freeze Pakistan terror financier accounts. You can read more of that too on page 28. How powerful forces try to stop Tinubu candidacy, coming from the APC vice chairman. And we have on Turkey, Syria earthquake deaths hit 7,146. Downside of the paper, we have Ogun, Ondo, Edo protesters storm banks and demand cash, where we can see some destructions that have been done, some fire, and some security agency trying to make sure there's calm. Downside of the paper, Ekiti owns pensioners 40 billion gratuity, coming from Oyebaji. So you can read more of that more on page 5. Federal government plans new policy to track public spending. That also can be found on page 25.
Fund as after 27. And the big story on the Guardian newspaper, Buhari cancels meeting with governors as TUC issues ultimatum. The writer says meets with Bagudu, Tambuwa, and Mefora EFCC boss. Tinubu bankers call for calm. Coming from PDP, hoarding of new Naira notes causing Nigerians pains. Protests rock Ondo, Ogun. Lagos APC suspends campaign. At the downside of the paper, INEC chair meets Emefiele demands concessions for election operations, and you can read that story on page 6. NDIC adopts new reporting template to fast track MFB's PMI's issued claims, and that's for the business, and you can find it on page 16. We have picture stories where we can see people stranded at the ATM, and there's also a picture story where we can see the CBN governor and the INEC chair, and that's all the news on the Guardian newspaper.
Alright, before we move further with other papers, I would like us to take a time out at this moment so we can let you call us in. Let us hear what your views are concerning the meeting that the INEC chairman had with the CBN governor and also with the National Security Agency. And we also love to hear about what you feel about most other stories that have been on the paper. So do not go anywhere. We'll be right back after the break.